I didn't believe in anything else, other than waking up and going to work, probably having a family in the future, retiring and then dying. That's what I thought life was about. I said without looking up at the customer in front of me. "Okay, miss, the price is $50.42. You can pay at the receptionist table over here." That customer left and I went back to my work. As I moved the spatula across the gleaming surface of the blue pill counting tray, the bell over the front door of the pharmacy rang its merry tune. I glanced up momentarily to see who it was. A rather petite woman with sharp eyes and a thick wave of gray hair walked in. That lady started talking to other people inside the pharmacy, which piqued my interest. Wasn't she here to buy something, or was she bothering the customers? It was hard to tell from here, but it didn't seem like anybody was put off by her. What I did see was that she was directing them to look at the paper she was holding up in front of her. My eyes narrowed as I focused on the paper, trying to grasp the picture that was on it, and it looked like a face. Well, maybe it was nothing to worry about, so I focused back on the task at hand and finally counted over the pills needed for the customer. Once I slotted the pills within the unmarked pill bottle and I gave it to the customer that came back. The customer thanked me and walked out with a smile on their face. That gesture was enough to warm my heart, just seeing people happy. It's why I became a pharmacist. I liked helping people, and it gave me the opportunity to find the right medication needed for their overall health. Another customer served was a good deed done, in my opinion. The new person that came in a while ago was going to be my next customer, as she walked up to the counter with no smile on her face. Something told me this woman didn't want my help, at least not in the way that I thought she did. "Excuse me," the old lady asked. "Good morning. How are you doing today, ma'am? How can I help you?" The old lady blinked in her hesitation. I was wondering if something I said put her off, but as the old lady looked down, I heard the rustle of whatever she was taking out of her bag. "Have you seen this person?" the old lady asked. A large paper was brought up in front of the plexiglass that separated the old lady and me. It displayed the face of a young adult woman with striking black hair. A rumbling grew inside of my chest. My forehead flared from a striking burn that was unexpected. Where was this pain coming from now? A flash of light appeared as specks of last night's dream popped into my head. I fought it and shook my head. Being at work, I couldn't let my abandonment issues crop up here. I returned my gaze to the picture. The longer I looked at the face, the more of the old lady I saw. Was this a family member of this woman? Like a daughter? My lips quivered as the bell rang out again. Another person walked into the pharmacy. That knocked me out of my confusion as I focused back on the picture. The lady was still waiting on my answer. I shook my head and mumbled, "No, sorry, ma'am. I never met this woman in my entire life." That was obviously not the answer this woman wanted, for the old lady's eyes squeezed shut in the distraught that passed over her face. I hesitated to ask whether this woman in the picture was missing, because that's the vibe I got. "Thanks," the old lady said, as she nodded in appreciation and spun on her heels, leaving me flabbergasted. That was odd. The next customer, a female, stepped up and asked, "Do you have any iron supplements?" I swiftly reverted to my work mode. "Yes, and good morning. What is the reason you're taking it for?" she said. Yeah, iron replacement. I need a month's worth." I replied, "All right, hold on, please. Let me check the cost for you." "Kinda sad, ain't it?" she said absently. I asked with a groan, That lady, she's been going around town for the past 2 weeks, asking anyone if they've seen her daughter. Oh, that's rough. I can't imagine what she's going through. But, I don't have children myself." My lips curled down in gloom. That was unfortunate. But I kind of expected it was that. I could only hope she was okay and her daughter would be found. Hopefully she finds her, was all I could say. Still, it would be easy to assume the worst. Stone Valley, the town I lived and worked in, was deep within the Midwest of America, and that meant forests were our neighbors, and everybody knew everybody else's business. I tried my best to stay out of that mostly, but it was hard to avoid most of the times. So many people that came here were regular faces that I knew a little about. It made my job easier because I would remember past prescriptions that they took, and it would allow me to avoid giving them conflicting medication off the shelf. Not everybody went to a doctor all the time. It also humanized them to me, so it wasn't just mindlessly giving out pills for me. I was offering relief, help, and assistance to people. That's how I saw it. As I was going home, there was a seed of fear in the back of my mind. It was unnerving to think of what could have happened to that young woman, and the possibility that that could have happened to me. The thing for me was I didn't have a family in Stone Valley. As an orphan, I was lucky to grow up in any foster family if I got any chance to. But I was mostly in shelters. I was too old to be adopted by anyone and was stuck in an endless loop until I dug myself out of it. That was my only option, to be successful, because it was lonely within those shelters. Even though they were filled with so many other children, it was always lonely. Many of those children grew up into miscreants of society, while I was standing tall in a good job. I was glad I made myself a success story rather than being a statistic. Stone Valley was growing as a town as well. From this new pharmacy to the new factory on the eastern side of town next to the river-fed lake. Things were growing within Stone Valley, and I was a part of a new wave of young people in town. Hopefully in town I can lay down roots here, and this could truly become my home. That was my dream, and hopefully the nightmare of the children's homes, a stain I couldn't run away from. But I would never read again. I did reach home safely and breathed out a sigh of relief knowing nothing happened to me, which was weird, and I never thought fear was so all-consuming. I guess that the woman's missing daughter really shook my core. That annoyed me, for I didn't want to live my life looking over my shoulder. The only thing I could do was pray for that old lady as I went to sleep. She didn't deserve that. A lot of people didn't deserve anything bad happening to them. When I closed my eyes, I hoped nothing bad would happen to me. But life was never that kind to me. Where there should have been darkness, there was light. Dreams I've had since I was a child manifested themselves in my head. They were usually a confusing mess of broken images of homeless shelters I used to be in. Those halls were always daunting for me. They were so long and narrow, yet empty. Help was hard to come by in these homes. They were always understaffed, so I never expected any help. Not even my fellow residents were any better. The distant cries of their voices haunted me to this day. Let their whispers die where the floor was. My feet touched it cautiously. The walls were inconceivable, but nothing was discernible to me, from the furniture to the scattered objects on that same cold floor. Such was the confusion in my mind as everything faded into a dirty blur. A light beamed across that floor, and my feet begged to feel its warmth. Vanessa, a soft, melodic voice called for me. That was a name I haven't heard since I was stuck in a loop of homelessness. I shuddered and glanced around. All I saw was darkness crossing the face of the enclosing walls. Out of the darkness stepped a lanky figure. Skinny. The clothes over it were dark purple, almost black. But in this light, the purple glow complemented the silver skin's luster. The striking thing about this figure was that it had no face. It was the pure hue of that silver luster. That head of his leaned in on me. The skin showed brighter, as if it warmed to my presence. Yet I felt cold, crippling fear traversing through me. Vanessa. Its voice vibrated in my heart with its tenor. I didn't answer. It spoke with vibrancy. Come to us, Vanessa. This was what I could never figure out. And that mystery deepened a cruelty upon my life, worse than not knowing my own time of death. I froze as the figure that knew me so well covered my face with its fingerless palm. My eyes ripped open. I curtailed my quickened breaths and tried to lean up from my bed. Oh, I hated those dreams. Or should I call them nightmares? They didn't feel like nightmares, and I've been having them since I came here. It always left me feeling more tired than when I went to sleep. My eyes blinked a fierce beat as I tried shaking off the lethargy. The energy in the air was different, and something pulled at my sanity. I rubbed my forehead as the room's cold grip on my body caused a brief shiver from its presence. Please tell me the thermostat didn't stop working. Ugh. I groaned and lifted myself off the bed and flipped on the lamp. It clicked, but no light washed over the room. I stared in frustration at the lamp, and after flipping the switch back and forth, I decided in annoyance to move aside the curtains and let in more of the morning glow through the window. Ugh, it was too bright. Something told me to check the time, but whether it was my phone not turning on or the dead clock on my dresser, nothing was working. Because I couldn't tell the time, I just assumed that I was late for work because my alarm was supposed to go off, and every part of me knew I missed that alarm. I checked the thermostat and realized there wasn't any power at all. Oh, you got to be kidding me. As I would find out, it wasn't just me. The electricity in the whole neighborhood got taken out. But that wasn't the only thing. In my hurry to get ready for work, it didn't take me long to notice that there weren't a lot of people around. There was a lot of noise outside, though, because everybody was complaining about where's their husband, their wife, and their child. My heart couldn't stop racing, and it wasn't my haste not to be late with no hot water to offset the cold morning blues. The sky was even worse. I could feel the burn of the sun and the light of its radiance over the town, its people, and pre-millennium 2-floor wooden structures erected in its magnificence. But the blazing circle of the sun never touched my sight, for massive gray clouds consumed the sky. The more I looked at them, they had no form as they swam down the curves of the mountains and the jagged roofs of the buildings. They didn't even seem like clouds, and it was almost like a thick fog that drank in all the happiness and left nothing but misery. It was a sweep of anger that took over everyone as I hopped into my car. My neighborhood was in chaos, and as much as an urge pulled me toward the chaos, what could I do except cry and comfort others in their grief? It was too much, and to some extent, I was too frightened to step forward. By the time I left, the sirens of the sheriffs blared into the district and signaled their worries were not unheard. But would they even be solved? Was the thing that worried me. My car pulled out of the driveway and went down to the main road, hoping to put that awful scene behind me. That wasn't possible, as I would find out. The whole town became an eerie shell of itself as the fog traversed further and further down from the hills and mountains surrounding it. Even the tower out at the pier was covered in the fog's nasty grasp. My fingers clutched the steering wheel tighter as I rode down the empty streets. Where was everybody? Was what the people complaining about back home legit? Was this really what was going on right now? My throat was seizing up at the dangerous thoughts swirling in my mind. This couldn't be happening right now. Yeah, I mean, it must be some sort of prank, right? The one time I would love for this to be a sick joke, I would end up finding out there was no punchline. I came into work a disheveled mess. My fellow workers were worried about me and thought I disappeared too. It didn't take long for my confused mind to register the madness going on. Our workforce was cut in half, and after an hour of getting myself together behind the counter, I checked my equipment. Nothing was working. The wall clock froze in at 12:30. My coworker complained about the cash register. The fridge was dead, and the UPS was not working either. This was ridiculous, and if I didn't restore any power soon, the medication in the fridge was going to become useless. Unfortunately, our attempts to start the outside generator was like fighting a landslide. Nothing was working, and even if it was, it wouldn't matter anyway because nobody was even entering the pharmacy. Normally, a slow day was a boring day for me, but it wasn't boredom that was shaking my faith. It was uncertainty. I sat there twiddling my fingers, hoping this was a bad nightmare at best. But fear was a terrible thing indeed, and it wrecked my body to the core. It was a terrible thing to not know something. All I had were theories bouncing around my small skull, trying to find solace. The door finally opened, and my heart and head lifted at the sight of a sheriff. "Hi, good day, ladies. My name is Sheriff Carlton, and I would like to invite you all up to the community center. It's crucially important," he said. I relaxed and came out from behind the counter and into the main floor of the pharmacy. "Why, though? What's really going on, officer?" I asked. He shook his head. "I'm sorry about this, ma'am, but we need everybody over at the center. I can't say much other than there's been some strange occurrences, and the mayor obviously wants to talk to everybody just to alleviate everybody's worries, you know?" The town hall was an old community center that didn't get used that much outside of children having their club activities there from time to time. Work didn't matter at this point. And that's when it became real for me. This was really happening right now. It wasn't a dream. This was reality. The workers and I went to the community center in my car. As I was driving down the empty road, all I saw were empty streets. It made me wonder how many people disappeared. Was it like half? Or most of us? If it was so many, there was very little explanation for this. This was not normal the more I thought about it. Something was really wrong in this town. That's what made the sight of them so striking to me. A line of people standing on the sidewalk. They stood there, straight as a mountain in broad daylight. They never moved. I passed them, and their faces, they never changed. My hand lifted instinctively to wave at them, but nothing. They never returned the wave as I continued to pass them. Unfriendly folk, weren't they? I wanted to ask my coworkers, but my coworkers were too engaged in their discussions. They talked a lot more freely about what was going on. I was not the only one with a non-working phone. When I parked the car in front of the community center, I couldn't help but notice that the hands of the clock at the front, they weren't moving. No electricity. All the electronics weren't working. The clocks were frozen as if Stone Valley became, stuck in time. I walked into the meeting hall, and what would normally be a packed crowd if this was the whole town was a mere scattered mess of crying mothers, pacing men, shaking children, and a few poker faces among them. At least some people were trying to keep sane within the madhouse. One of those people was the old lady. She had a determined look on that chiseled face of hers. Something told me she knew more than anyone here. Either that, or that was a lie. I was telling myself that in order to make myself feel better. I rubbed my arms and breathed short, soundless gasps as the sheriff and mayor tried to have this emergency meeting without too many hitches. And that was if occasional shouting and loud crying weren't a distraction to the overall meeting. They ran down everything that they feared was going on. The whole town was hit with a mass of disappearances. As far as explanations, there were none. The police knew nothing. And this didn't help matters. Everybody wanted answers, but nobody had any. The authorities said that they were trying to find out why the electricity was gone and was making efforts to possibly restore it. Nobody said anything about the clocks, though, but I didn't dare to raise my hand and ask. It was a clock. Nobody cared about clocks, so it was a stupid fixation for me. A lot of people were distraught, but the best they could do was to monitor the situation. We were all advised to stay home and to not leave town. The fog, according to them, surrounded the whole town, and they weren't sure if it was safe to drive out on those hilly roads. It was insane, and I choked on my own saliva, realizing how trapped we were. What kind of malevolence had hit this town for this to occur? My thoughts raced at several possibilities, but almost all of them were not. They weren't real to me. For something like this to happen, it could not be normal. It had to be something worse than that. The voices of disgruntled people raised in a complaint about the new law levied against them. I shuddered from the uproar, but my eyes caught sight of a slippery canary weaving its way through the crowd. It was the old lady, and she left like she was on a mission. Something consumed me to follow her, and I didn't travel far behind her before she realized I was on her tail. She turned around as she reached the parking lot. "You," she said. I froze as her eyes cut through me with those dark spears. Then, as if she realized I was but a mere scared human, they softened into a calmer expression. The old lady said, "Right, you're the pharmacist?" I chuckled to myself to ease the nervousness. "Yeah, I'm Cameron. What's your name?" she said. "You can call me Danielle. Are you planning to leave as well?" Yes, that was probably it. I could feel it in my bones right then, the way she moved. That was the emotion running through me, the desire to run away. I shook my head. "We shouldn't. Didn't you hear what the officer said?" Danielle said, "Look around you. All of this is happening and nobody's doing anything. They must be a part of this, don't you think?" I looked into those eyes, and I could tell she was looking for somebody to give her some comfort. She wanted someone to believe that she wasn't crazy, even though I did think she was a little crazy. I wasn't stupid to believe there wasn't something fishy going on in this town, but my explanation was a lot more grounded. For I said, "I believe you, but I don't think it's because they're a part of this. I think it's because we're incapable of dealing with this. I mean, our sheriff's office is small." Danielle frowned, obviously not pleased with my reasonable response. She whipped her head around and continued. "It's possible," she said, but quickly shook her head. "I don't trust none of those people in there, and you shouldn't either." That statement struck me odd, but I had to know why it left such a heavy weight upon me. I asked why. "They couldn't find my daughter, and now they can't figure out anything?" "No, they're in on this, You'll see. That was a far jump. How the hell she reached from they couldn't find her daughter to she couldn't trust them to maintain the peace in the town? I couldn't relate to this, but more so than that, as scared as I wasn't wrecked by paranoia. I mean, Danielle had lost the most important thing to her daughter. I couldn't imagine the emotions behind that calm demeanor. I don't want to sound disrespectful, but how do you know? I asked. Danielle's eyes flickered to the side of me. The opening of the door drew my attention to people starting to file out of the community center. None of them looked happy at all. Why would they be? Most of their family were gone, and they were told to just stay in their homes and weep. I guessed I could understand why Danielle wanted to leave. She wanted to find her daughter. Sitting around was not going to help her. Have you seen their faces? She asked. And I asked in confusion, their faces? She shook her head. Those police officers. I don't trust them. I told them about my daughter and nothing. No emotion. Nothing. I never liked the new ones that came in after the old ones retired. I didn't want to get into gossip, but I didn't have anything better to do since I was stuck here with nothing to do. I said, I guess the new boys are just getting used to the job, probably? Danielle rolled her eyes. Oh, maybe. I laughed. So, have you already prepared to leave? Do you have someone helping you? Danielle shook her head. I don't got anybody. I don't even know where I'm going to go. But I got some money saved over. I'll figure it out. But I'm telling you, young lady, something is wrong with this place. A twinkle in my heart fluttered as I smiled. I didn't want to lean into the negativity she was spewing. It'd be too easy to delve into despair, and I wanted to lift her up a little bit. Then let me help you pack up to leave. Her eyes widened at the offer, and she gladly accepted it. So after I talked with my coworkers who decided that they were going to go home individually, it left me with Danielle. She didn't have much to carry outside of one suitcase. Before we knew it, we were on our way. Thank you, she said. I said, it's fine. I just wanted to help ever since. I stopped myself, not wanting to sound like I was pitying her. Since when? The pharmacy? You're new in town. Of course, I moved here to take this job several months ago. Your parents must miss you. I don't have any. Oh. My reassuring smile told her it was fine. I didn't want to let my past define me, but as I looked outside, the town was dead. It was really eerie to see. The only people I saw were them. And when I meant them, it was just like the last time. A line of people stood on the sidewalk, next to the roadside, with rigid, unmoving expressions on their faces and their standing posture. They were just standing there. Were they looking at something, or were they waiting for something or someone? Nothing creeped me out more than seeing them, and I almost wanted to believe I was imagining it. Then Danielle's head turned as we passed them. I wasn't imagining them. Stop the car, Danielle said. I screeched the car to a stop, and Danielle jumped out. Hey, I called after her. Sliding out of the car, I looked over the car roof and peeked at her speed walking across the street toward those people. I rushed behind her and shook off any reservations. By the time I reached behind her, we were on the edge of the street, just 2 feet away from the sidewalk where they stood. Danielle tilted her head from side to side, as if looking for somebody. I wanted to ask, but I couldn't muster a response, because terror racked me with how strange they were acting. They still weren't moving. At this distance, I could see their faces clearly, and their clothes waving in the wind. Yet they were statues. Why weren't they moving? Bailey? Danielle said in uncertainty. I stiffened in anticipation. Daniel made one step forward, and one of the persons, an old man, turned to her. So they knew each other? But something wasn't right about this. The look that man gave reeked of rage. I wanted to grab Danielle's shoulder and pull her back, but she just kept advancing towards him, and my legs lacked the strength to carry on. "Bailey, how have you been?" Danielle asked. Something told me that wasn't Bailey anymore. The man reached out to grab her just as I pulled Danielle back. That was all that set him off. Bailey's mouth opened and gray tendrils spun out of the darkness of his throat and flicked their tips at our faces. My eyelids twitched in a disgusted shock. I got swarmed by a sea of nausea. The other persons turned their heads, and that same cold stare cut through us. Bailey approached us with those tendrils whipping around. "Jesus!" Danielle bellowed. She turned around and jet back to the car, and so did I. We jumped in and locked the doors. I put the car in drive, and when I looked up, Bailey was standing in front of the car. I looked behind me. Another person was glaring into my rearview mirror. Left, right, every window, somebody was standing next to the car, staring at us. My heart wanted to jump out of my chest, and my stomach turned. The car rushed forward as my foot bashed into the pedal, knocking over Bailey in a violent action. I didn't stop and kept driving. There was no way in hell I was looking back. The speedometer kept increasing. Cameron! Cameron! I blinked and noted my location. My feet whipped toward Danielle, who was holding her chest, that raised and fell in rapid succession. I slowed the car down and parked it in front of a school's lawn. To think we reached so far. Pretty sure I drove at least a quarter of a mile. My hand finally ripped away from the steering wheel, and I couldn't stop shaking. What have I done? I couldn't believe it. Did I just run somebody over? I mean, I had to. I had to do it. That man was scary, especially with those things coming out of his mouth. Or was I imagining it? I have to ask Danielle to be sure. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I asked. Danielle lifted her hand off her chest as she steadied her breathing and calmed down. I'm fine. I'm so sorry about your friend. Her eyes narrowed as she stared through the front window of the car, and she shook her head fiercely. That's not my friend. But I mean, you called him Bailey. You know him, yes? Danielle didn't even look at me, and she kept staring wild-eyed through the front window. She rubbed her forehead as she leaned into the seat. No, well, yes, but not very well. He lived here, and he's not supposed to be here because he was missing like 6 years, Danielle said. What? I asked in surprise. Yes, that's why I was surprised when I saw him. I couldn't believe it. But that can't be him. What were those things that came out of his mouth? I shook my head. I don't know. We need to tell the police. Danielle's head whipped back in disgust. For what? What is the sheriff going to do about that? That ain't normal. I don't know what that was. I wasn't even sure anymore. There was a hope that my mind was playing tricks on me, but reality was a fragile thing, I realized. All right. We're going to keep going and make sense of this, I said. Danielle stared at me like I was a crazy woman. She clicked her tongue and said, I just want to leave. Okay, let me get this car running. I drove off and continued our travel through the town until we reached the edge of it. We were getting closer now. Specks of the fog were dropping in around the car like ashes to the faraway flames that we couldn't see. I needed to calm down, but my breathing was getting hollow. So, how long have you lived here? Danielle said. My entire life. You? Because I know you're the new pharmacist. You said you have no folks. I never met them. I'm an orphan. She looked back at me with a somber expression before nodding in respect. Sorry to hear that, my dear, Danielle said genuinely. To think she was leaving the town that she grew up in for so many decades. The question kept popping into my mind, and my lips moved on their own. You know we haven't found your daughter yet? Danielle exhaled. Oh, there's nothing left for me there anymore. My husband's dead, and she was the only thing holding me in that town. So, no better time to leave than now. I guess that made a lot of sense. Our car slowed as it reached the edge of the woods. The fog was getting worse. I could barely see anything, and I could understand a little bit more why the sheriffs were resistant to allowing people to leave. What I didn't expect was the swift blast of red and blue cutting through the fog and reaching us. They were sitting on the route, so a police car raised out from under a tree's shade and onto the road, blocking our way. That was surprising, but as my car slowed, Danielle's hand gripped on my wrist. Her cold fingers pressed hard into my skin and transferred every ounce of fear I could tell she harbored. I didn't need to look at her to know. Out of that car came Sheriff Colton. He had a big smile on his face. We weren't smiling as we watched him approach us. Where are you going, ma'am? Sheriff Colton asked. I hesitated as his eyes dug deep into mine. We're leaving, officer, I uttered. Sheriff Carlton glanced at Danielle. I'm gonna have to ask you to turn around, ma'am, he said. I shook my head. Sir, we can't go back. And I don't even know if I should tell you this, but you're probably not going to believe me when we saw some people, and one of them had something come out of their mouth. It almost touched us. I don't really know what to think about it. That's what I saw. I can tell you which street I saw them, though. Sheriff Carlton snickered. Oh, is that so, little miss? Well, why don't we go back to the spot where you saw that? I want to see it for myself. My heartbeat pounded in my head, and that was weird to me. For he was an officer of the law. No police officer should scare me. So either I was overreacting or my intuition was shouting at my naivety. I heard Danielle taking a sharp inhale. And I'm going to have to respectfully tell you that I don't want to go back, Danielle said. If there was any fracture in Carlton's personality, he didn't show it. And that only made the smile all the more frightening when he said it again. Ma'am, again, I'm ordering you to turn around. Now. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Do I not have the freedom to leave? He shook his head. No, you don't, miss. I didn't like this. Danielle breathed out in exaggeration next to me as the frustration grew. I swallowed and finally found my voice. And, why can't we leave? He turned his stone gaze toward me. If you wouldn't believe me, as annoyed as we were, that smile never dropped off his face. We are trying to maintain control of the town. We don't know what's going on, so until then, everybody is staying inside the town. So, if you would please just turn around, Sheriff Carlton said. He could say please 50 more times. That smile was not natural, and neither were those eyes. My instinct shouted for us to run, but I decided to play it cool. Yes, sir. I turned the car around and Danielle stared at me, so I could tell her heart was beating like a drum at what I was about to do. The car rolled back in the direction of Stone Valley. We shouldn't be going back, Danielle said. I exhaled and closed my eyes. A woman could only hope she was right. Sheriff Carlton got into his police car and drove with us. The fog rolled in more, even as we got closer to Stone Valley. Whatever was going on, it wasn't getting any better. My lungs struggled to hold up the weight of Danielle's disgruntlement with me, or my uncertainty with my decisions right now. I couldn't see anything further than 5 feet thanks to this fog. It was unnerving. We couldn't push the car to its limit, and I kept it at a steady 20 miles per hour. We weren't far from the town, so we should have reached it by now, but I couldn't see anything. My fingers bit into the steering wheel. The tiny bones creaked from the pressure. Sweat careened down Danielle's face, and my throat lumped up from the hardness. This was crazy how cornered we felt. The only thing we could see was the asphalt. No trees, not even the dirt was within our gaze. Quick breaths escaped me. I looked into the rearview mirror and saw the approaching bumper of the police car. At least Carlton was behind me. Sheriff Carlton pulled the police car to the side of us and tried speeding up. I looked around, and Sheriff Carlton's face was gone, replaced by a silver head of mud. There were no eyes, no lips, no nose, not even any muscles fluctuating from the ripples crossing his head as the police car swayed from its shaky driving. The sight sent my heart rate skyrocketing into space because the similarity between that and the figure in my dreams was too eerie to bother thinking more than a second about it. There were no allies in this town. I needed to get us out of here. But how? We could only move forward. I could run the car off the road, but I couldn't see anything, and the last thing I wanted to do was hit a boulder or something worse. My foot jammed down and the police car sped off in the fog forming around us. Our car screeched into a tailspin. Danielle and I got thrown forward. My arm hit the dashboard while Danielle yelped in terror. I looked up and saw the police car stop more than 10 feet away. Danielle, you okay? I asked. Danielle spun her head around like a wet wild bird and gasped, Yeah. The door of the police car opened. I swallowed and pushed my door open. Danielle, we need to go now. Danielle sank low and followed me out of the car from my side of it. Whatever Sheriff Carlton was right now, it walked slowly and purposefully toward us. As he stomped through the thin hands of the fog, the clothes shackled under that faceless head. It had no face, and I wasn't sure what was on mine, but I didn't want to find out. Danielle and I gripped each other's hands and ran into the fog. At least it took us in with a lovely embrace. Whether it was better than the safety of Sheriff Carlton, I wasn't sure. Our shoes thudded into the road. The dead silence pierced a ferocious burn into our imaginations. We couldn't even look around and see anything. What if an arm grabbed her? Or if someone called her name? It would shake her heart out of its meaty cage and leave her a dying husk without a body, feeling the warmth of its pulse. I couldn't deny it, but this loneliness had me begging for anything. Something to come to our aid or to bring understanding beyond the reaches of this forsaken town. My shoes sank with each step, so we must have reached off the roadside. We must have been in the forest. But as we would find out, it wasn't any woods, for a familiar sound emanated into the suppressed atmosphere. I said, "Is this the factory?" Danielle gave me the answer when she huffed out a breath. My hand got released, and the fog raised into rolling columns around us. I slowed, for my legs got weighed down by the pain of lactic acid. It gave us a clearer image of the earth in front of us, leading to the large, interconnected buildings of the metal factory. That meant we were on the east side of Stone Valley. We were a long way from where we started, for I could see the blue shine of the lake reflected off the greenery of the hills. Danielle held on to a large trolley and said with a quiver of her lips, "Cameron?" I opened my mouth and choked on my suffocated breath, coughing immediately. My whole body was falling apart, but I had to keep going. I looked back into the fog behind us and knew whatever that sheriff was not going to stop until it had us. "Come on, Danielle. I know you're tired right now, but we have to keep moving," I said. She nodded her head. We kept going and tried to navigate our way through the huge stock of metal corrugated sheets. I had never been to this factory before, newly built, and I didn't even know what they produced. It was shiny looking with its pure metal infrastructure, curving columns and glossy, multicolored roof shingles. I couldn't even appreciate it as the fog rolled over us with a terrible growl. It wasn't dark, with the light beaming down upon the earth. Yet something unsettling flew up the back of my neck as I noted shifting lines breaking in and out of the light. Was that a wire? If it was, it looked like there were several of them. There was so much I wanted to say, but I was scared to. I didn't know what Danielle was feeling right now. Maybe Danielle read my mind. "Swear to God, I hope we can get to the other side," Danielle said breathlessly. The lake was starting to come within sight as we moved between a column of work trucks. I said, "Amen to that." We've seen too many horrifying things, and at this point, we just wanted to leave. We didn't want to stay here. We didn't want to understand what was going on. As we got around the lake, what seemed odd to me multiplied by 100, I was right. Those were wires. That wasn't what was weird to me. It was what those really thin wires were holding on to. Bodies. Unmoving, still, frozen human bodies were hanging off those thin threads. These bodies were being hung 10 to 20 feet over the lake and the grassy bankside by wires that stretched into the sky and never ended until the fog consumed them. I wasn't sure what I was feeling, but it wasn't a good feeling at all. As far as Danielle, she was shaking a lot. There was no explanation for this, and it took every fiber of my body not to run. "Miss Cameron?" Danielle asked. I swallowed. Yeah, I see it. I don't know who those people are." Danielle stopped shaking and stepped forward. I reached for her shoulder, but my fingers missed the mark. She kept going to the edge of the lake. Unsure what to do, I could only follow. She looked up into the sky, and her head was on the swivel as it moved with sharp precision. I watched her, and it took me only a few seconds to understand what she was doing. She was looking for her daughter. But her daughter couldn't be here, right? That was me trying to keep myself sane by denying that possibility. But was it? God, was it so far-fetched? As I looked up, it was clear to me this was as real as it looked. They all looked sort of alive, but the question I was asking myself was whether they were alive. This was insane and dangerous. None of us knew who these people were. A part of me wanted to assume that some sicko did this, but I don't think any human being could pull off this mad design. Where did those wires lead? And what the hell is going on in this town? What great entity was wielding this nightmare over their lives like some dark symphony to their delight? Danielle was creeping closer to the lake. She was lost to the madness of her desire, her only want in life, to find her daughter. She was determined to find her. Something like that wasn't alien to me. The desire to find family? It was something I always wanted. This was why it was a travesty, what was happening to Danielle. The madness within this town. All these strange events that have occurred since morning have tested her patience and my resolve. Yet, she never gave up. Even if the situation didn't exactly look so safe. I swallowed and stepped beside Danielle. My hand grasped hers, and her fingers immediately tightened on mine. She needed strength right now, just as much as I did. She kept looking. Her head went back and forth more frantically. Tears flowed and broke along her round cheeks. Danielle tried to move forward, but I pulled on her arm. She turned back to me, her red eyes communicating a sense of betrayal that I never committed. Danielle, I don't think your daughter is here, I said. That was not what she wanted to hear, for Danielle's jawline shivered as her eyes became vicious in their searing strike. Danielle shook her head. No, she has to be. I mean, look at them. If she wasn't found by the police, maybe she would have been here all along. Amazingly, I ended up having to be the voice of reason. If that was the case, then who put these people up? Why didn't the police find this out all along? They're literally right in front of us, and they don't look okay to me. Danielle pulled her arm in a fierce tug, and me with it. I never trusted those cops, and you shouldn't have either. You saw what he turned into, and now you're telling me to leave? Why? You don't want me to expose this? I said. Expose what? We're alone right now. We don't have anybody to go to. If we stay in this town, or we get caught by whatever the hell that Sheriff Carlton was back there, we won't be able to expose anything. We have to get out of here. Danielle frowned, and she shrunk back from the power of my rebuttal. It was not in me to talk with such vigor like I was rebuking her, but I was still looking over my shoulder, back at the factory. If the sheriff was walking at a normal pace, he should be at the factory by now. We didn't have enough time. Danielle glanced up at the wires, then at me before showing a pained expression as she swiftly shot her eyes through the myriad of people hanging by a wire. It made me feel sick to say this, but I felt like it had to be said. Danielle, you have to let her go. Even if she's there, I don't think... Danielle's hand became so tight around mine, it hurt. The rest of the words I couldn't say them. In a way, I didn't need to... I mean, Danielle probably already knew. Danielle shook her head in a fierce shudder. Then she stepped back. She fell and hit the ground. I never let her go, but got pulled with her. Standing over her, watching a big woman who was older than me, crying like a child that wanted their toy back, was disrupting to me. The rustle of leaves made me look to the side. My legs tensed. I glared into the darkness of the bushes and watched as the fog thinned. A squirrel ran out from under a leaf, and a massive weight lifted off me. Danielle's free hand grasped her jaw, and that hand clasped over her twitching lips. Her fingers rubbed her face in a comforting gesture. Tears burst forth with more force, but she swiftly wiped them off as her head dropped in despair. Please, I said. She closed her eyes and inhaled. I waited as she collected herself, and my chest compressed from the terror that rested between us. The terror that we could not explain. I wished we could, but a part of me didn't want to know if it kept me safer. Danielle raised and blinked her tear-drenched eyes at me. I'm sorry. I wish... Shh, I know. Come on. I'm still here for you, I said. Yes. She nodded her head and got up. We moved around the lake, and even though Danielle kept looking up, I think she was okay with leaving this dreadful place behind. I was sure her daughter would want to see her live on. This town was dead to us, and I started to agree with what Danielle had said back then. There was nothing left for us here. Interesting noises entered my conscience, and I turned around to see the shaking forms of bushes and shrubs sitting under the shade of the trees. My chest felt the sharp pain of a spiked-up alarm as I pulled Danielle to walk faster. We walked ahead of the waiting branches and leaves as sounds crackled behind us. Danielle looked back and gasped. My eyes widened when I saw the sheriff stomping toward us without hesitation and chill. "Vanessa!" Sheriff Carlton called. My heart stopped, and bile rushed up my constricted throat. How the hell did he know my name? Crap! Danielle pulled me out of my shock. We picked up the pace and ran. "Don't run from your duty," the sheriff yelled. What was this madman talking about? Our legs, already exhausted from the exceptional efforts being made to escape Stone Valley, were becoming mush under this pressure. Soon his yells became a mere buzz as we pushed through the forest. My shoes thudded upon the dry mud and displaced stones as we continued toward the fog. Danielle's hand slipped from mine as my foot sunk into the mud, and she ran on without me. I groaned from discomfort, ripped my shoe free of the moist earth, and ran. We got closer and closer to the fog, and as we stepped in, everything went so dark. My lips twitched, and my body responded, shutting down in a flurry of horror at our situation. Terror quickly filled my lungs and blocked my voice. I waved my arms forward in a desperate hope to find her. My hands touched nothing. Sweat careened down my face in the rising tempo of my racing heart. "Danielle?" I called. "Ouch! Don't shout off my ear. Damn it, I hear you. Wait." I swallowed. Okay, that was a relief. She was close. Her hand smacked against my wrist. My fingers curled around her hand and gripped it tight. I didn't want to lose her. She was the only person I got. We needed each other more than anything else, even now as the fog deepened in its vigor. Our feet crushed weak branches and sank into the earth as we walked forward. The fog was starting to thin again, but my heart pounded louder in my head. Some awful energy was consuming my ease. There was something wrong. I could feel it. It pulled at me, and thoughts bounced inside of my head and caused my hands to quake. I fought it and swallowed any ounce of built-up terror to stay positive. Then I bashed into Danielle's back. She was shaking. The tremors of her body reverberated against my skin. I looked over Danielle's head and became stone at what I saw. It was the figure from my dreams, standing tall in the center of a banquet of yellow flowers, wearing long purple robes, rolling over its long arms that bent over its chest and clasped its hands in reverence. My lips twitched and I couldn't muster up the words to even speak. Danielle was pulling on my arm and I was sure she was calling my name, but all of it became nothing more than crackles in my head. "Vanessa," it said. I said, "How the hell do you know my name?" The skin across its face rippled like a water surface as if my question upset it. "I have always known your name, Vanessa. You are one of us, after all." A tremor ran through every part of my body from the words that hit me. I looked at Danielle. Danielle was wide-eyed as she gazed into mine. I couldn't tell what emotions were building within her at the time, but my mind already played this out perfectly. Speaking slowly, I said, "Don't you dare lie to me. Don't you come near me. I don't know you." Even if you come in my dreams, I never knew you. The figure moved its wrist to its face. I stiffened, and even Danielle made one step back in anticipation to run. Its other free hand waved over its wrist. My shoes sunk into the earth. What looked like a watch materialized on its wrist. The wrist spun and revealed the time to me in block numerals, and it was ticking based on the blinking bar in between those numerals. It spoke. "You are late, Vanessa," I said with more anger. Late to what? Does it look like I care? What is going on? Explain this to me. I wasn't sure if I was angry that we got dragged through this traumatizing event, or if it was because he knew who I was, and maybe I knew who I was. It said, "You already know." My eyes opened, and it was a revealing moment, as what were dreams were no different than any fiction of reality. Danielle said in a whisper, Miss Cameron, please, don't tell me." I didn't want to say to her, for I was too much of a coward too. But when I turned to her, she gasped and pulled away. She let me go, and I saw my skin become as silver as any liquid metal. My eyes widened in shock, and though I feel like that were my eye, did I even have eyes? What was I? My arm straightened and flexed into a straight line. I glanced along its length and saw the reflection of my environment printed onto it. From the image, my face was silver under the darkening clouds of the gathering fog, with no eyes, no nose, and no lips. Whatever joy left my body the moment I saw myself for who I really was. I was one of them. That was always my duty. This was who I was supposed to be. An agent, sent by them to this town. I stood, shocked and befuddled with this new development, but I understood one thing. I wasn't mindless. Either I forgot, or I was not functioning properly. But I'm not going to be a product of my environment or what someone said I was. My fist clenched and I spoke proudly. "You're gonna have to keep waiting, because I'm not coming to you ever. I'm Vanessa Cameron, the pharmacist. I'm not whatever you think I am. I am what I want to be." Its head raised as if to look down upon me from its overpowering height. "You assume you have a choice. You didn't choose when you carried all these people to this lake." My heart, if I ever even had one, dropped down a cliff. No, that was what I was afraid of. It wasn't like I knew I didn't know I was doing this, so I couldn't be liable. That couldn't be me. I don't remember any of that. My head shook fiercely. "I already told you no." "You sure about that, Vanessa?" I said. "Go to hell." My hand reached for Danielle. Danielle dropped back and shivered in terror. Her face showed a complete breakdown of confidence in me. It struck me like a might of thunder that was debilitating to my bone structure. My legs wobbled as if it was about to fail me. I said, "Danielle, listen to me. I was never going to do that to you." Danielle pushed herself away from me until her blouse caught on the branch. She tried to unattach herself. I dropped low and moved to the side of her. "Get away from me," she shouted. I froze. It was like the power of her voice sent vibrations through me, for my silver skin rippled from its violence. I shook my head and touched my bosom. "You know me, Danielle. I would never harm you." "Do I?" She tore a hole in her blouse and pushed herself further back. My fingers dropped as I saw the venom in her eyes. Crouching, my bones lost the energy to lift me up. My fingers dropped to the ground, painting the dirt with its lost warmth. bruising my skin and leaving me destitute. Everything in my soul burned, and I lost all motivation to live in that moment. Was this my goal in life? A kidnapper? For what ends? An agent to a conspiracy I couldn't even remember?
Vanessa, come back,
it said. I paused and noted the ripples along my arms. It was falling to the wayside. My confidence, my resolve, my identity, everything fell away, leaving whatever this silver form was, a shell of myself, was what remained. I was alone again, and I hated that. My fingers pulled inward and dug up rocks with the dirt.
Vanessa,
it called. I turned to this figure that had haunted my dreams. Its hand reached out to me. I rubbed my fingers, dropping dirt and smaller stones into sprinkling ash along the ground I trod. My fist tightened into a ball around one rock. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as I approached.
"You already know,"
it said. I took the hand of the figure. "You're right. Accept my apologies." With a tug, I swung the jagged point of the rock and broke the watch on its wrist. It snarled and stepped back in disgust. I reached out my hand for Danielle. "Come on, you only have me. Please, Danielle." She never accepted it, for contempt crossed her face at my offer. Danielle jumped up and ran away from my now closing hand. I was left alone, as was expected. My hand fell to my side. The figure whipped its arm and glared its soulless face at me. I peeked over at the watch and saw the numerals were gone, replaced by the black surface posed over by cracked glass.
"See, Vanessa, what did your disobedience get you? You were never going to be accepted amongst them,"
it said. Maybe this figure was right, but as I stared at my arm, I remembered how far I'd come. It reverted back to its once alabaster sheen and became fleshy again. My head throbbed as I shook it. What are you doing to me?" it said.
"Nothing. You'll come back to me eventually. It's inevitable."
I turned around and left the figure standing there. It shouted,
"You cannot escape. Everywhere you go, it will always be your fault. You are inevitable."
I didn't want to hear it, and I most definitely was not going to become that, whatever that was. Branches and shrubs were pushed aside as I ran through the forest. I searched for an exit, the light that would save me from this truth. I was willing to accept myself. My destination didn't stop here. I was sure there was something out there for me. I just have to search for it. My home was out there somewhere. That wasn't a mad idea, was it? It didn't make me a fool to believe that I could dream, right? Hey, sci-fi horror fans. It's Teresa. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. And remember, stay cosmic.